Welcome to today's episode. I'm really sorry to start this laughing. The reason I'm laughing is because I love Bridget Jones, and there's a moment in Bridget when she has to introduce someone, and all she's got going around in her head is Mr. Tits Pervert, Mr. Tits Pervert. So, with that in mind, I've been practicing for about 10 minutes beforehand to welcome my guest today, which is welcome Michelle Shavdia.
Perfect.
Ah, yes, nailed it. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's good. We've been chatting before we came on the podcast, so we've got to know each other. We've realised that we're on the same wavelength. Mercury retrograde is happening whilst we're recording this. We are glutton for punishment, so it could all go completely pear-shaped. We've had coffee beforehand, which is not so ceremonial, but never mind. We're just a little bit buzzy. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to hand over to Michelle in a moment because I really love what Michelle does in the world, and the fact that we've been meant to record this podcast numerous times and we've had to cancel for whatever reason. And Michelle is a psychologist, and she particularly focuses on working with children. Mm-hmm. And so this is really prevalent for what's going on in my life at the moment, which I'm probably going to share and overshare during this podcast. Mm-hmm. But first of all, I'd love to just welcome you in. Mm-hmm. And if we can kick off with, why did you get into the work that you do?
Good question. Okay, so I suppose if we were to go back to right where it started, the reason why it started is I lost my dad at 14. So my life was going on a certain trajectory. I kind of assumed I was going to kind of go more into like a media path, journalism, loved acting, loved dancing, that kind of thing. So I thought that was the life I was going to have. And then his passing at 14 kind of changed things. So I kind of went that way. And it kind of made me realise how much more there is to life. And it made me also realise how much more I wanted to give back to life. And I don't mean this in a horrible way to people who are in the media industry, but I wanted to do something a bit more deeper.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm all for media, I love media, but there was just something deeper and more purposeful to his passing that I felt called to do. I think it kind of came to me that was quite a negative experience that happened to me, but if I could get something positive out of it and help others go through something, if they're going through something similar, then that would make that experience not as negative.
Wow. Did you get support at 14?
So I did, but I think, as we were talking about earlier, I wasn't quite ready for it at that age. Yeah. So there were many times when I was taken to counselling and I would just sit there in silence.
Yeah.
So I can remember one experience, and it was just one session. The counsellor came, and the whole session was like maybe 45, 50 minutes. Didn't say a word, nothing. And I think toward the end, I kind of said, I feel like I should be, I said this to the lady, I think, I feel like I should be feeling something, I should be saying something, but I don't know. There was nothing coming out. Yeah. I wasn't quite ready to process it, or it was too much to process. Yeah. So at that point, it didn't work for me. So since 14, and I'm now 38, there's been numerous things I've tried, some more successful than others. But now I'd say at this age, I'm in a much better position, and I have been for quite some time, to be able to help others with it. But we're all works in progress, so there's still more to learn.
Yeah,
for sure.
Never ending, isn't it?
Never ending story.
So, do you find that you've kind of developed, because of your own experience, do you feel that you've developed your own ways of being able to work with children to help them to open up and to understand kind of what's going on with them?
Yeah, I think so. I think, yes. I've obviously done a master's degree in coaching psychology, so professionally I've got the qualifications and I've done the learning and got the knowledge. But I think I think the reason why I'm successful with the majority of children that I work with is because I'm just myself and I'm authentic, and I don't know what it is I do. I can't put my finger on it, but children just, not all children, but the majority of children seem to open up to me. Yeah. And I've had sometimes too much. Like last year, I think it was, or maybe the year before, I had an experience where I had 10 children I was working with, and there was something about me that enabled these children to just overshare and just tell me loads of stuff, and I was just sitting there with, okay, this is a lot. So I don't know what it is I do. Maybe it's because I'm an empath.
Yeah.
So I'm able to be give a lot of empathy, and children and people respond well to that, perhaps. But yeah, my friends always laugh. They always say, "What is it that you do?" Because I always get people disclosing things. I'm like, oh gosh. But
yeah, it must be. Yeah, and also you have such a warmth about you that you automatically feel really comfortable.
Yeah.
In your presence. So, and children really, they need to feel that, don't they? And then you're not coming across as a stern kind of, you know, I mean, you are professional, don't say that, but you're not coming across as one of those kind of people where they're going to be intimidated. They need to know that they can sit there and talk to you kind of like a friend.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like a critical friend, perhaps. I don't know if that's critical is the right word, but yeah. And I always say to them, the best way this is going to work is if you're open and honest, knowing that I'm not going to judge you for anything that you tell me, and nothing you can tell me is going to shock me. And obviously, if they say something that's safeguarding wise, I can't keep that to myself, but anything else, I will be keeping confidential. And I think that statement, perhaps, is what helps the children feel like they can trust me.
Yeah.
And they tend to then open up and tell me things.
Well, and so you work with, I know that you also work a lot, don't you, with children that have got ADHD. And this is something that you yourself was diagnosed with only recently.
Yeah. So this is the interesting thing. So so I moved to Colchester in, I think, 5-6 years ago. I was predominantly working with young people up to that point. Came to Colchester, was doing all the networking that you have to do when you come to a new area with a business, and met lots of different people, and got in with a social enterprise called Maze, which works with parents and children with additional needs, and also another one called Autism and ADHD. So I did a lot of work with them. And then through that work and other work I was doing in schools, I came across a lot of children with ADHD. And at this point, didn't know I had ADHD. And there was a particular school I went to, and I was working with 3 boys, one boy in particular who had ADHD, and it was extreme. And I was like, wow, this is like, he was bouncing off the walls. And by the end of it, though, he'd given me a hug, and he was like, thank you so much. And it was beautiful, and he's changed quite a lot. I've got a lot of contact still with his family. But I remember seeing that boy and thinking, wow, you know, that's incredible to be like that, to be the way that he was. And then to find out then, I think it was a year or 2 later, that I myself also had ADHD, I thought that was like, wow. I wonder if me having ADHD is what helps me work with these children. Yeah. Perhaps they can
resonate with it.
Yeah, they resonate with it. They pick up on it or something. But yeah, I didn't realise until I was 37. And I'm 38 now, so.
Wow. And how do you think has it been like obviously a really positive thing? Just actually, I don't mean labelling it, but actually having an understanding of, oh, now I know what I'm working with.
100%. For me, it has been the most positive thing, because I've gone through 37 years of not knowing what was going on for me, and getting often misdiagnosed, and me doing my own kind of Google diagnosis, thinking, is it this, is it that, which is just like, in a way, soul destroying, because you're just like, you never quite figure it out. So to be able to get a clear diagnosis and know what you're working with, it just kind of opens up things for you, and it helps you be more focused and go, okay, this is what it is, and this is how we deal with it, and I really accept it. I'm really happy with it. There is times, obviously, you feel like, oh, I wish I'd known when I was younger, but then I didn't, so there's no point me thinking like that. It is what it is, kind of thing.
Yeah, I've got quite a lot of friends around me that have kind of said to me that they've just got a diagnosis, or they feel that they might be. And one particular lady, she said that it was so valuable for her finding out that she'd been diagnosed, because she said, now I understand why I never fitted into the boxes of school or following this certain path, etc., etc. And she said, it's just now that I've got this whole new acceptance of self.
That's it.
And also then for her to understand that she's got 2 boys, and one's all ADHD and one I think is more on the autistic spectrum, I think. And she said, one's taken after her and the other one's taken after the dad. But, the whole family have got, they've got the autism or the ADHD within them. But just for them to actually be able to work together and understand each other. It's like any condition, isn't it? When you know what you've got, and you know how to work with it. It's allowing other people to be able to kind of understand where you're at.
Yeah.
So that there's acceptance from all around. And like you say, I think that's probably why so many of these children that maybe are not diagnosed and some that will be diagnosed will be able to resonate with you.
Yeah.
Because they're going to pick up on that energy.
Yeah.
Because it does, I do believe that
it
gives
is.
off a very different vibe and a different energy.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, prior to finding out, I probably wouldn't have known many people of my, like, adults who had ADHD. I probably would have known maybe one or two. Majority would have been children. And then since being diagnosed, I may know, like, I can count on one hand. Well, no, maybe two hands now, how many people I know of ADHD. But being in their presence is just like, you're friends instantly. You get each other.
Yeah.
You're like on the same vibe, your same wavelength. And it's really hard to explain, but you click. It's like you click. And it's like, sometimes I find being with certain other people who may not have ADHD and may have maybe a different condition or something, you really notice the energy difference.
Yeah.
Because I was teaching a group, and I remember just the energy I was getting from this group. It was very flat. I wasn't getting very much back. And I'm someone who gives a lot of energy. Yeah. So when I don't get much back, I'm like, this is hard work. So I do agree with you. Yeah, it is a lot to do with energy.
And I know that obviously some of the work that I've been doing around inherited trauma, and they say how ADHD comes from, obviously we can get it inherited so that it can travel down all through the generations, but also that traumas that happen to us either at birth, during conception, obviously with your work as a psychologist, do you see those patterns as well? And are there particular ones that you see that seem to kind of repeat themselves as certain patterns that kind of go, that kind of links into...
Yeah, it is quite an interesting subject, actually, and I think possibly a bit contentious. I love a bit of contention.
Yeah, let's bring it on.
But someone who I really rate, recommend, respect is someone called Gabor Mate.
Yep, love
Gabor Mate. And he's a big proponent of this idea, isn't he, that ADHD comes from trauma, because he himself has got ADHD, and he was born during the Holocaust, so his mum would have been very stressed, and he thinks that's how he came to have ADHD. And I can see why, like, he thinks that way. But then when I've obviously been grappling with this, and I sometimes get a bit confused, because you obviously got that way of thinking, but then you bring that idea to people like other psychiatrists, or he's not one, but psychiatrists or medical profession, and they were like, trauma does not cause ADHD. In fact, I was told trauma does not cause ADHD, but ADHD can be traumatizing, which I thought was quite interesting way of looking at it. So I'm in two minds. I'm not too sure. I think for me, it's a bit of both. If I'm honest, I think from birth, I know from what my mum has reported, I cried a lot as a baby, and it was very difficult to soothe. So I wonder whether that was because something was going on with my brain. Yeah. And where that's come from, I can't fully say. Yeah. Because they can't really tell me, like, the causes still. Yeah. But so from birth, I was a challenging child, and it started young for me. So, but then there has been trauma as well in my life, so it could be a mixture. Yeah. And whether that brought it out more. Yeah. Particularly. Yeah, I think so. Wow. I think the traumas that I've had probably were more traumatizing because I've got ADHD. Yeah. So for someone else, they probably wouldn't have found it that traumatic. Yeah. Maybe. And maybe the reverting, like you said, when you went to your therapy, that you kind of went back into yourself and you didn't really talk. That's probably your way of coping with it, because maybe if people hadn't really, through a younger childhood, really understood who you were before the big trauma of your dad, that they're not then going to understand you again now. So it's like you've kind of learnt that pattern of not feeling really understood and heard. And then it obviously impacts it even more when you have got this massive trauma that you're trying to kind of express and talk about. Yeah, possibly, yeah. And I think this is it's like I said to you earlier, this is hugely prevalent for me, the fact that you work with children that have got traumas. Yeah. And, I'm always being somebody that wants to be real and authentic, and so, my podcast is going to be no different from when I'm in real life or in my teaching. My daughter, her father left when she was about 7. She was glad that he went because she knew that he wasn't, and I should be careful because I doubt he will listen to this. He wasn't the greatest dad.
And she had therapy at the time because she had a lot of anger, and she used to express it really easily at 7. She used to go up and really pummel the pillows and really express it out.
Yeah.
She'd bounce on the trampoline and scream and shout.
Yeah.
And then it kind of eased up a little bit, and she didn't have any contact with him for 4 years. Last year, she invited him back into her life. She wanted to give him another chance.
Okay.
And unfortunately, he let her down again. But this time, it's impacted her massively. But because she's always kind of been so emotionally mature with me, and with the teachers say at school that she's able to express herself, I was like, oh, she seems to be coping okay. She was quite blasé about it, like, oh well, it's done its thing. But really, in the last couple of months, my daughter started doing some self-harming. She's kind of controlling her food. She's getting into a little bit of trouble, and this is really out of character for her. But luckily, I'm really grateful that her school have recognised that it is her mental health, and it has taken her to reach this real climax of kind of the trouble that she got into yesterday at school for her to finally break down and talk about, how angry she's had, the rejection she feels, just even walking down the street and seeing other dads with their daughters. And or their children, and just seeing them having fun. She said that hurts her so much. And her big thing is like not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy of him loving her. Which is really hard. She hasn't lost her dad the same way you lost your dad.
But it's kind of the same.
But it's still a trauma for them. And I think, with the work that I do, I see women coming in all the time that have got either a father wound or a mother wound. There's always like a problem with one of them. And I see this impact on people in their 30s, their 40s, sometimes their 50s. And so I've always been really aware that, I don't want my daughter to carry these wounds. And this is kind of ironic that my daughter does.
Yeah, but clearly there's a reason for that, because you're in a good position to be able to then help her through it, and not you yourself, but kind of what's going on for her.
So this is divine timing, the fact that you see, this is why I do these podcasts, see? You get people coming in and it's like, oh, I need you in my life.
Well, I do believe that you meet people when you're meant to meet them, for sure. That's always how synchronicity I'm a big believer in.
Absolutely. So do you feel that, there was a lot of children, and I know because the school said it, and I've got friends that have got their children going through the same thing. I know that they say, self-harming is a trendy thing on TikTok, but they're doing it for a reason. It's not just because it's trendy, they're doing it because they need attention. And it seems to be on the rise. The school did mention to me as well that it seems to be on the rise. So do you feel that this is kind of an area that you cover a lot as well with these young, I guess, is it mainly girls?
So typically it's a mixture. I would say more for like the secondary school age, it's typically more girls. And then primary school is actually, weirdly enough, it's typically more boys, it has been.
Okay.
I wonder if it's because of the way that they display their emotion is more noticeable as a child, perhaps. And then they kind of, when they get older, maybe, I don't know, they show it. They might still show it. But yeah, it's a mixture. What was I going to say about that, though? Yeah, but yeah, I can work with both.
And obviously there's a lot of trauma that these kids are carrying because, I remember growing up, I'm in my late 40s, I'll say that quietly, where all my friends, we were all in solid units, we had mums and dads, and it was really solid. And now, it's so, a lot of us are single parents, or we've got, blended families, or we've got these changes. And as much as we kind of think they don't impact our children, they are.
Yeah.
And as much as I think I'm giving my daughter my absolute all, and she's got a great nan and granddad, and my brother is around to be a father figure, it doesn't take away the fact for her that she hasn't got that solid father figure. And I think that's going to be the common thing, isn't it? That you've got these children that have got, these fathers that are absent, or the fathers or the mother, whatever's going on.
Yeah.
And that must be huge.
Yeah, well, that just reminded me of another organisation, because I do a lot of work in tendering, and there's an organisation based in tendering called Lads Need Dads. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Okay.
They're an amazing organisation, but their kind of ethos is that a lot of boys, young men who end up going into the prison sector, I think I've got this right, it's often because they don't have a father figure.
Yeah.
So you probably would, if you were to survey like 100 men in prison, probably like 90 of them perhaps didn't have a father growing up. And so they talk about how important it is to have that male role model. Yeah. As much as us as women can give so much, there's only like so much. Yeah. There's a certain element that needs to come perhaps from a father figure. not
Yeah.
necessarily the biological father, but father figure. But yeah, it's gonna have an impact. It is.
Yeah.
Because we're kind of conditioned and brought up to believe that it has to be two parents, and it doesn't have to necessarily be male or female, but like that is kind of how we're conditioned to believe that it has to be.
I think that's a good point, isn't it? Isn't it? Even if it is two women or two men, you tend to have a more masculine energy and a more feminine energy.
Yeah.
That they still get that dynamic. It's tough, isn't it?
It is tough. It's tough to be a parent, and I think now more so, like you mentioned just before about it being now more so than ever. Like what we've just been through with COVID has actually been very traumatizing. I think a lot of, if we actually stopped to actually think about what we've just been through as adults, it would, like, I think a lot of us would just be breaking down because it was quite a traumatic experience. But if that's for us as adults, can we imagine the impact it's had on our children who are still trying to come to terms with like puberty and, you know, family dynamics and all that other stuff, and then you got COVID thrown into the mix. I mean, it's no wonder that mental health issues are increasing.
On the rise.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Not that I can say it's because of that, but I know that they are noticing that, aren't they? That it's.
I mean, I know that I've looked at a lot of the charity sites, you know, the mental health, and it is very much that's what they're kind of, you know, really highlighting is the impact that, you know, the lockdowns really had, and the not being able to socialise with their friends.
I mean,
and the restrictions that were placed on them. You know, some children would have taken it on a lot harder than the others, and the fact as well, like, you know, if you've got people around you wearing a mask, you've got that kind of still face experiment going on where you can't see people smiling at you. You've got that, you've got that co-regulation going on.
Exactly.
So it screws them up.
100%. I know, like, some people kind of say, "Oh, kids are so resilient. You know, they can bounce back from that." I think they're just saying that. They're just trying to say that. I could be wrong. I may be wrong, but
be controversial,
just to make themselves feel better. But I do think it's going to have an impact, like you say. The mask. Yes, like when I was saying about, like, sometimes when you're in certain company and you're not getting very much back, and that's even without the mask.
Yeah.
So if you put the mask on top and you're not getting that kind of what you normally tend to expect, it's going to have an impact.
Yeah.
Neurologically.
Absolutely. Oh no, I completely agree with you. I really do, because I think, you know, especially these little tiny ones that are like, you know, 2, 3, 4 years of age, that all they're seeing, especially if you've got their mums and dads still walking around with masks, and those that are living still massively in fear and wearing them in their house or, you know, in the car.
Yeah, I know.
You know,
when they're on
like
their own.
Those poor children that have now got no, like I say, no, they haven't got that regulation going on. They haven't got that co-regulation. And yeah, I dread to think what the impact is. It's kind of not worth thinking about, really.
No, exactly.
You just turn yourself to gin by 12 o'clock in the middle of the day. This is just water. But it could be gin. So tell me a little bit about so your company that you have, and that your blah blah blah. Yes, just fill me in.
Yeah, so I set up 11 years ago. So I became self-employed 11 years ago, after having been employed for 5 years in a school, doing a job which, now that I know I've got ADHD, was completely the wrong job for me. I was an events organiser. Don't do that if you have ADHD. That's one of the main symptoms of having ADHD, is you struggle to organise. So I remember having that job and frequently breaking down because I was like, I literally don't know how to do this. I can't do it. Why can my colleagues do this and I can't do it? That was constant for the whole 5 years, pretty much. So I ended up leaving that job and becoming self-employed, which was the best decision I ever made, because I ended up doing what I'm passionate about and what I'm good at. I think that's really important. You need to figure that out. People need to figure that out for themselves. What is it that you're good at and what do you love doing?
Yeah.
And do that. Quite simply, if you can. So I did that, but again, maybe because I've got ADHD, I did it quite foolishly. I literally left that job and, like, I got like a part-time job for 11 hours, so it wasn't going to bring in a lot of money. So I kind of took a brave leap of faith and just did it and just hoped for the best. Obviously, it's worked out for me, but it was quite difficult for about 9 months figuring stuff out. But got through it, and now absolutely love what I do. Love my career. Like, literally, when I get up every morning knowing what I'm going to be doing that day, I'm like, bring it on. Like, it's a joy to do what I do because I've created it.
Yeah.
That's what, when I was an employee, I found it difficult because I found being told what to do very hard. I want to be able to decide that for myself. I don't want other people to like manipulate me.
Yep, I understand that one.
I find that quite challenging. So now I feel like I think, again, maybe ADHD or maybe just being a human as I am, freedom is very important to me.
Yeah.
I need to feel free. And when I feel controlled, bad news. I don't do well with being controlled. I react negatively to that. So now that I feel free, like a bird, I'm the happiest probably I've ever been. Perhaps. Yeah.
I wonder if, I mean, obviously we're not going to do it right now, but check out, have you looked at your human design? Do you know about human design?
No.
Yeah, it'd be fascinating. So I wonder if you're a manifestor like me, in the fact that so many things you just said, and I'm like, oh, that's how I function. So it's about different, it brings in, I think, 7 different theories. So you've got like, your chakras, your I Ching, your astrology, and all these different things. And it's about your blueprint. And so it's quite interesting. So when you can literally live in alignment with yourself,
nice.
And as a manifestor, you have your ideas, you create them, but you don't want to be told how to do things. You want to be the one informing. And yes, it'd be quite interesting to dive in and look at that just from that point of view. But so your company?
Yes, sorry, I didn't answer the question that you asked.
No, it's fine.
So I became self-employed and then set up this social enterprise called Find Your Spark. And by social enterprise, I mean it's not for profit. So I'm not doing it to, become very, very rich, although, it would be nice to be rich, but that's not the intention. Yeah. The intention is to do social good, quite simply, and to help people. Like, I really think that's important. Like, we lost a bit of sight of that. So I initially set that up in, I think it was 2011, 2012, to work specifically with at-risk young people. So at risk of becoming NEET, or at risk of mental health problems, or at risk of going into the prison sector, or what have you. So that was initially what I was doing, and I was running like group and one-to-one sessions with young people in schools and at their homes, and that was all going really, really well. And then I moved to Colchester in 2015, and it's kind of evolved to enable me to work with parents, which is what I do one-to-one. And I also do some trainings, but it's more, what I love most is working with parents one-to-one and the young people one-to-one and in groups. So I do a mixture of something called brief solution focused therapy and anger management, something else I do, which is more for obviously the little ones and so on. And I love it. And I also work with social enterprises now, which is another passion of mine. Yeah, helping them.
It's just so lovely, because obviously you are so passionate about what you do, and it is nice when you find what you want to do in your life and you are passionate about it, and you're clearly doing a lot of good. And you have a new client that will be coming to see you very soon. There was something else I was going to say on that, and my brain just... I was going to ask you... So obviously, when you are, and I know this myself, when you give out so much and you're doing therapy, what do you do to fill you up at just in your day-to-day?
That's a really good question, because I think that is really important. I think especially when you're self-employed, and maybe social enterprises more so than entrepreneurs, but I think both, you tend to work a lot, perhaps more, because you have to work in order to bring in the money and the clients, and it's constant. So there were times when I used to get quite burnt out, but not so much anymore. I'm much more balanced. Like I'd say maybe like last year or the year before, there was a point when I had like 13 different projects and I was just getting completely overwhelmed by it. So I brought on a secretary. She helps me now, and it's become a lot more simple. But I do definitely balance it. So things that I do now, and it's really important I do it in order for me to function just normally, but also be able to work to the best of my ability, is I go for lots of walks. Very simple. We'll go for lots of walks and listen to podcasts. That for me, and that's good for people with ADHD. The walking apparently is good for the brain, the kind of movement. Apparently, I found that out after. So that's one thing I do. Another thing I love is spirituality, and I started practicing, I think 2, 3, 4 years ago, something called shamanism. Which was life transforming for me. Like, I've practiced loads of different things in my life, spiritual wise and otherwise, but this is the thing for me. This is the one that resonates. Absolutely adore it. It just works. It's just the most amazing thing.
Yeah.
And that's really helped me. So I do that. What else do I do? Same as everyone, I suppose. Like watch your favourite documentaries, things like that, and making time for self-care. That's something I've learned recently.
Yeah.
So fitting in that facial, or fitting in that massage, or I was going to say fitting in the gym, but I don't quite do that. But the other things,
that's all fair.
and making sure, like putting in your diary and making sure nothing else gets in the way, because I learned really recently that you've got to profit first.
Yeah.
In the sense that you need to make sure when you're planning your week or planning your month, you come first in the sense that you get what you need done, and any other time left over, that's what you give out.
Yeah.
Not the other way around.
Really good way of saying it.
Yeah. That really helped me, because before I used to do it the other way around.
Yeah.
I used to give to others, and then whatever dregs were left over, I was like, I've got like 1 hour that week to do something for myself, and wonder why I was so exhausted.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really valuable point. We do, if we're working mums, and particularly if we're single mums, but anyway, even if we're working mums, we do burn out, or we can burn out. We can, if we don't prioritise, and if we're not healthy, then we haven't got anything to give our children.
Yeah.
And they need us fully functioning, don't they?
100%. And I'm sure you've heard this before. Podcast listeners probably heard it before as well. But it's the airplane mask analogy, which when you go on an airplane, you get told, put the mask on yourself first before you put it on your baby, which sounds completely counterintuitive, because you think, oh no, I need to put it on my baby first. I love my baby so much. But if you put it on your baby first and you don't put it on yourself, then if things go wrong, you're not going to be of any use to your baby. So you put it on yourself first, and then you're going to be of better use to your baby and children. So you really do need to look after yourself. And that's why I've really delved into and gone into the parent work, because I think it's the parents actually who have been kind of somewhat neglected, because they always used to put their children first without realising actually the parents are the ones that perhaps need that me time as well.
There's a lot of good take-homes from this, people.
I'm glad I'm of use.
Yes. Oh, it's been lovely chatting to you. Well, I'm sure we could probably, now that I realise that you're into Shavdia, I'm like, we could talk for hours, but we're going to start to wrap up right now. But I'd love to really just say thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I think it's really lovely to hear, as sad as your story was with your dad, the fact that you turn that into something so positive to give out to others, and also with the ADHD, like learning that for yourself and how that, that can support not only you, but all the people that you work with. And I'm sure there's many adults that you meet, you sit there going, I bet they're ADHD too.
I need to learn not to do that so much.
We'll get the analysis afterwards. And just for actually really bringing it home that we all do need to take that time for ourselves and look after ourselves. Because our mental health, our emotional well-being, our physical well-being is super, super important. We are, because that's about saying to ourselves, isn't it, that we are worthy.
Yeah, we matter.
It's reminding ourselves that, we matter as much as everybody else.
Yes, definitely.
And I think that's a really valuable point.
Yeah, and just on that point, it is so important, because when it comes to, say, resilience, I know that was a buzzword, wasn't it, recently? But if we look at that, we are much more able to be resilient if we've looked after ourselves before things get hard and things get tough. Because if you've looked after yourself and then things get tough, because you've kind of built up those reserves, then when the going gets tough, you're going to be much better able to cope with it. And the opposite is also true. If you haven't looked after yourself and then the going gets tough, you're just going to crumble. You're just going to be crying in a heap in the corner because you haven't been looking after yourself. It's so important.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's a takeaway for people.
That's another good takeaway. Now, I've got one final question for you, which I'm going to spring on you. It's a fun one, though.
Okay.
If you had to play one song that would get you up and makes you feel like an empowered feminine.
Oh, wow.
It could be cheesy or it can be like, spiritual. It can be anything. What would it be?
Do you know what it is? My favourite, this is the song that resonates so deeply, and it's something I listened to when I was younger, and then I've recently come back into love with. Like, I heard it recently and it was just like, yes. It's Lauryn Hill, Everything is Everything.
Perfect.
That song does something to me. It's so powerful.
I'm going to be listening to it on the way home from
Do.
this. And we're going to add, so the idea of asking you, you're the first person I've actually asked this question to.
Exciting.
We're going to create an Empowered Feminine Spotify playlist, and I'm going to ask every podcast person to tell me their song. So yours goes at the top.
Woohoo!
Should we high five on that one?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Michelle.
You're so welcome.
It's been an absolute honour to have
it's
you
been lovely.
on the podcast.
I'm so glad I came.
Yes.
Today.
I know, it worked out perfectly.
It was meant to be.
Yes. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to listen to us as we just chatted about everything that kind of decided to just throw its way at us.
Yeah, I know.
And hopefully there's some things in this podcast that have really resonated with you, whether it's about the ADHD or, you know, whether you've kind of listened to it and gone, yeah, I need to get some help for me or for my child. Whatever the take home is, or even if it is just that you need to kind of make that time to do some self-care. I'd like to thank you for listening in. And now I'm going to say goodbye to you, Michelle. Shavdia.
Well done. Fantastic.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.